what, from my point of view, and I'll say this several times because I've learned from teaching my classes, and we say it a few times, there's a good chance that they'll understand it. Is that I would, my understanding is of my mandate, not all I'm trying to do is get you to do my job for me, so is that we have roughly 3 months from now we should come up with a policy statement or an act which would be then shared with governments and industry and community leaders. And so I'm asking you to think about if these are, first off, if these are the right kind of policy initiatives that we should be undertaking, what are the steps that could be taken in the next 3 months to shape these into a more formal context so that we could go into that are doable project? And secondly, what are the potential outcomes and impacts of these outcomes on public policy that might emerge when the work is done, a year from now or 2 years from now? So I'm asking you to think, and I'll say this 2 or 3 times, so don't miss it. What could be useful to do over the next 3 months to shape these things? And what do you think would be the long-term impacts and outcomes of this in terms of shaping public policy? So I'm going to ask Deborah to click on these 7 areas, and as I say, these are for initial discussions only, and the idea of the next hour is to see whether they stand the test of time. So the first one, the first group related to predictive modeling. So I was aware, and I think I had a brief discussion with Trevor yesterday, that of all of the work that's been done, particularly by Biodiversity BC, and some of the trend analysis, that there's a considerable information base now on the current status of biodiversity in BC. And there's a considerable amount of information being gathered by various groups on climate trends in the past and where we are now. What I thought would be useful as a potential communication tool is to get a group centered around peak, SIG, and potentially also Biodiversity BC, because I'm not sure what their longevity is, which would actually translate the next phase of biodiversity and actually look at the potential impacts on biodiversity of climate change over the next 20 to 50 years in BC, assuming no change in current management practices. I don't want people to start building in different models of adaptation because they come later. But as a policymaker and someone who's been in front of cabinet too many times in my history as a deputy minister, unless the impacts can be clearly articulated of what will happen in terms of impacts on biodiversity and other changes, kinds of policies that I think need to be done to address ecosystem resiliency won't get past the cabinet table unless cabinet begin to understand that the costs of doing nothing are greater than the costs of doing something. And I think we need some kind of pictorial suite of information that would identify what potentially are the shifts in biodiversity patterns around the province as a result of climate change on these major ecosystems of the province. And I've suggested using the BEC basis as visual analysis, but I'm open for other levels, but it needs to be a fairly broad regional scope. We're not looking at detailed systems. And forgive me if that's been done. From my understanding at this stage, that piece of work has not yet been done. Is that a fair comment, Trevor? That the predictive analysis of what will be, on a fairly systematic basis, what will be the shifts in biodiversity over the next several decades, assuming no change in management practices, there's a piece of work that is yet to be done. And it seems to me that the PICs, PSIC, whatever these things, are the group to do that because they were set up by government with the capacity to do that. So that's the first suggestion that I want you to think about. Associated with that would be a subset, a specific subset, looking at the implications of vegetation ecosystem changes on the species at risk. But I only use the species at risk as an example because it has a public identification. People relate to the fact that there are species at risk, in my experience in government. And if this work showed that there is currently this fabric of species at risk, and I think totally it's fair to say that your report that's coming out in June will give a snapshot of what are the current ecosystems that are at risk. And the idea is that what additional suite of ecosystems are going to be at risk as a result of impacts of climate change, and what the nature of that risk and what species are going to be affected. I think brings very well clearly to the public focus that they're losing something potentially. So the risks of losing species become much more of a dynamic feature of public policy. That's my concept. So I'm suggesting that as one component of this analysis is a particular attention to what does it mean to species at risk? Where are the risky systems? What changes are going to take place? What increased number of species are going to be extirpated and are at risk in local environments as a result of the climate change scenario? The third subset of this is an economic and social assessment of these changes in the context of the resource use. So the work that I would be recommending is that this is not only a biophysical analysis, it's an integration of biophysical, economic, and social analysis. And that the team that would do this would be composed of both ecologists and biologists. There's also economists and social scientists, and looking at what are the implications of these shifts on bio-communities in terms of forestry, tourism, recreation, hunting, fishing, and wildlife, so that the public policy can be informed about what are the potential impacts on the provincial economy and social structure if no substantive adjustments are made in resource policy as a result to accommodate climate change. And I think that I don't believe that work has been done. If it has been done, I'm not aware of it in BC. I believe, Jean, is beginning to be done in the States. You can speak to this once we've gone through all these areas. But from my point of view, I think that the policymakers need to know sooner rather than later what are the risks of doing nothing to the economic and social fabric of the province, so that the ability for them to absorb some of the policy changes which I'll come to in the future are then put in context. And I'm being overly dramatic here, but I know that I personally went to Cabinet and said that I think that in terms of providing ecological resilience, we should double the park system and provide 20% increase in connectivity corridors across the province. I said to Deborah as well that I would get 10 seconds before it was thrown out of the Cabinet office. I'm exaggerating, it would take less than 10 seconds to be thrown out of the Cabinet office. But on the other hand, I'm going to say that the economic costs of climate change on communities and resources is in the neighborhood of $2 billion a year by 2030, and that one way of accommodating that is to build an ecological resilience, which involves a change in looking at land use, connectivity, corridors, and protection. And that would result opportunity costs of $500 million, and getting a different response. So I think there needs to be some kind of quantum, not only of the changes in biodiversity, but what does it actually mean in economic, social, and cultural terms in the province. So I'm suggesting that one group, after this breakout session, in a breakout session, would put their minds to what would be involved in undertaking these three tasks. How could we proceed to develop a snapshot of different forms of change to ecosystems in the province, biodiversity, what are the implications on species at risk, and what are the implications on the gross values that would be placed at jeopardy as a result of that. So let me walk through all of the policies. So that's one policy area of three sets, and I'm open for adjustments and modification. The second area is all about shifting gears in governance, and this then is moving towards adaptation. And how do we deal with a changing world in a meaningful world? And I'm not sure exactly, I've got my notes here, no idea whether they will transcribe them here or not. But what I'm saying is, what are the implications of moving towards an ecosystem approach to managing resources? My way of doing government business on watersheds and LRFPs, decisions are made on what I call inputs. In other words, people apply for forest tenders, people apply for mining permits, people apply for water resources, people apply for waste discharges, people apply for roads, oil and gas tenders, etc. All of these are regulated by individual agencies in accordance with provincial statutes. All of them are doing the right thing in accordance with the Forest and Practice Land, the Water Act, the Range Act, the Land Act, the Oil and Gas Act. The cumulative effects